all countries must respect equality of states and the right of people for self-determination. And they also mentioned the United Nations General Assembly resolutions, and this is clear that what they mean is the series of resolutions which they passed after the beginning of the special military operation, and which demand condemnation of Russia. Russia get out of Ukraine territory in 1991 borders, but there are other United Nations General Assembly resolutions which were not voted but which were consensual. And among them is a declaration on principles of relations between states on the basis of the Charter. And it clearly says, by consensus, everybody must respect territorial integrity of states whose governments respect the right of people for self-determination, and because of that, represent the
Egypt and some other friends of Nigeria will surely come out as a nation because they are fighting a just cause. Even a little child on the street will tell you this. We shall never go back to Nigeria again. God's grace will surely emerge as a nation. And so as far as this war continues, we will fight to the last man.
The leader of the Biafran people is His Excellency Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Ojukwu.
Those hot days, the Quakers, indeed, the only thing we could do was to find a place where our fleeing compatriots could at least find an end to their flight. This is what Biafra is, the end of the journey for a persecuted, massacred, pursued people. We have made all attempts at a democratic resolution of this crisis. I have offered open elections, plebiscite. I have offered just an open carte blanche suggestion to anybody who can find a democratic way of finding out the wishes of the people, let him suggest it and we will go for it.
Diplomat has finally spoken about Biafra Declaration. According to him, self-determination is not a crime under international law, citing UN resolutions and principles. However, in Africa, especially in Nigeria, any call for self-determination often lead to suppression and conflict. But in Europe, North America, and even in Asia, those calling for self-determination are treated with understanding, dialogue, and respect. But in Africa, especially in Nigeria, those calling for self-determination are treated as terrorist, clamped down by military, suppressed, jailed, and even killed. The Biafran conflict of 1967 to 1970 is highlighted as a historical backdrop for ongoing agitation for independence. However, critics of the Biafra movement often cite the devastating consequences of the Nigerian Civil War as a cautionary tale against renewed calls for independence. Meanwhile, there is an ongoing dispute within the Biafran leadership attributed to issues like gender biases, with male leaders allegedly undermining female leaders, lack of clear communication and preparation before leadership transitions, possible betrayals or sabotage within the ranks. In this kind of movement, trust and unity within the movement's leadership is very important to achieve its goals. African leaders have been criticized for disregarding constitutional and human rights, including the right to self-determination. Also, they claim that external influences, particularly from European countries, perpetuate conflict in Africa for economic gain. To truly achieve independence and be recognized as a sovereign state, Biafran leadership need to resolve internal disputes within themselves and present a united front. Leadership accountability and proper communication are emphasized as key to addressing conflicts within the movement. Let me tell you a story that goes back decades, but still feels as fresh and raw as if it all started yesterday. It's the story of Biafra, a story of struggle, self-determination, and hope. A story that's as complex as it is heartbreaking, but also one that carries a universal truth. So imagine a quiet room somewhere far away in Europe. A Russian diplomat sits down for an interview, not to talk about his own country's challenges or the drama unfolding in Ukraine, but to address something happening thousands of miles away in Africa, the Biafran movement. He leans forward and speaks with a calm but firm voice, saying, "Self-determination is not a crime." That one sentence hangs in the air, powerful and clear. It's the kind of statement that should be simple, but for many, especially in Africa, it feels radical. What does self-determination even mean? Well, it's the idea that every group of people has the right to decide how they want to be governed. It's about being able to say, "This is who we are, and this is how we want to live." International law through the United Nations recognizes this right. It's written in the principles of the UN Charter. You'd think that something so fundamental would be respected everywhere, but that's not the case, especially not in Nigeria. The Russian diplomat points this out. In Europe, if a group calls for independence, they might face some opposition, sure, but usually they're met with dialogue, negotiations, and some level of respect. Take Scotland, for example. They've held referendums to decide if they should stay part of the United Kingdom. There were debates, yes, but nobody labeled Scots calling for independence as terrorists. Now think about Africa, and specifically Nigeria. In Nigeria, if you even whisper the idea of self-determination, you might be arrested, labeled a rebel, or even killed. The government tends to see any such calls as a threat to national unity, a crime so severe that military crackdowns often follow. Why is it so different? Why does the world treat self-determination one way in Europe and another way in Africa? That's the question the diplomat raises, and it's one we need to explore. To understand where we are now, we need to go back to 1967. That was the year Biafra declared itself an independent republic, breaking away from Nigeria. At the time, the southeastern part of the country, where most Igbos lived, felt marginalized. There had been ethnic tensions, violent killings, and political instability. The people of the southeast believed they couldn't stay in Nigeria any longer. So, on May 30th, 1967, Colonel Odumegwu Ojukwu, the military leader of the southeastern region, declared Biafra's independence. The hope was to create a safe haven for the Igbo people. But Nigeria's federal government didn't see it that way. To them, Biafra's declaration wasn't just about self-determination, it was an existential threat to the unity of Nigeria. What followed was one of the darkest chapters in African history, the Biafran War, also known as the Nigerian Civil War. For 3 long years, from 1967 to 1970, Nigeria fought to bring Biafra back under its control. The war wasn't just about guns and soldiers, it was also a war of starvation. The Nigerian government blockaded Biafra, cutting off food and supplies. Images of starving children with bloated bellies shocked the world. By the time the war ended, over 1 million people had died, many of them civilians. For many Nigerians, the war left deep scars. It's why, even today, when someone mentions Biafra, some people immediately think of the horrors of that war. They say, "Do you really want us to go through that again?" But the dream of Biafra didn't die in 1970. The people who believed in it passed their hopes down to the next generation. Over the years, various groups have kept the flame alive. Some, like the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, have been very vocal. They've organized protests, rallies, and even declared days of sit-at-home protests in the southeast. However, the Nigerian government has continued to respond with a heavy hand. Leaders of these movements are often arrested and labeled as terrorists. The military is sent in to suppress protests, and sometimes people lose their lives. It's a cycle of violence and repression that makes the idea of dialogue seem almost impossible. But here's the thing, movements like this can't just be crushed. The more you suppress them, the more their supporters believe in their cause. It becomes a matter of principle, a fight for dignity and justice. This is where our Russian diplomat comes back into the story. He isn't just making a legal argument when he says self-determination isn't a crime. He's also making a moral one. He points to examples from around the world. In Europe, when Catalonia wanted to separate from Spain, there were protests and political drama. Yes, but nobody bombed Catalonia. Nobody rounded up all its leaders and threw them in jail indefinitely. Yet in Africa, self-determination movements are almost always met with violence. Why is that? The diplomat asks. He suggests that it's not just about African governments wanting to hold on to power. There's also the issue of foreign interests. Africa is rich in resources, oil, minerals and more. The more divided and unstable Africa is, the easier it is for foreign powers to exploit those resources. Now let's shift gears and talk about the Biafran movement itself. While they're fighting for independence, they're also dealing with internal struggles. Leadership disputes, lack of trust, and even gender biases have created cracks within the movement. For example, one of the female leaders in the movement has faced resistance, not because she isn't capable, but simply because she's a woman. Some male leaders struggle to take orders from her. They think, who is she to tell me what to do? There's also the issue of poor communication. Leadership transitions haven't always been smooth. Decisions are sometimes made in secret, leaving others feeling excluded or betrayed. And as the Russian diplomat points out, movements like this need unity to succeed. If the leaders can't get along, how can they convince the world to take them seriously? So what's the way forward? The diplomat believes it starts with dialogue, not just within the movement, but also between Biafran leaders and the Nigerian government. Dialogue doesn't mean giving up. It means sitting down, listening to each other, and finding a path that respects everyone's rights. It's about compromise, yes, but it's also about justice. The Nigerian government, for its part, needs to recognize that self-determination isn't a threat. It's a right. Suppression might work in the short term, but it only fuels resentment in the long run. Let's look at other parts of the world for inspiration. Scotland, for instance, held a referendum in 2014 to decide whether to leave the United Kingdom. They voted to stay, but the fact that they were allowed to vote in the first place shows a level of respect for their rights. Or consider South Sudan, which gained independence from Sudan in 2011. While their journey has been far from perfect, there's been conflict and instability. It shows that independence is possible when the international community supports it. Biafra's path will be different, of course. Every movement is unique. But the principles remain the same: respect, dialogue, and unity. In the end, the story of Biafra isn't just about one region in Nigeria. It's part of a bigger story about justice, equality, and the right of every group of people to determine their future. The Russian diplomat reminds us of this universal truth. He says that self-determination is a right recognized by international law. It's not a crime, and if the world truly believes in justice, then it must stand by those fighting for their freedom, not with weapons or interference, but with understanding and support. As we wrap up this story, let's remember that the fight for self-determination is never easy. It's a journey filled with challenges, setbacks, and heartbreaks, but it's also a journey fueled by hope. For Biafra, the road ahead will require courage, unity, and a willingness to learn from the past. It's a journey worth taking, not just for the people of the Southeast, but for anyone who believes in the power of freedom and justice. And as the Russian diplomat said, self-determination is not a crime. Let's not forget that. So that is the story of Biafra, complicated but ultimately hopeful. It's a story that reminds us of what it means to fight for your beliefs, even when the odds seem stacked against you.
All countries must respect equality of states and the right of people for self-determination. And they also mentioned the United Nations General Assembly resolutions, and this is This is clear that what they mean is the series of resolutions which they passed after the beginning of the special military operation and which demand condemnation of Russia. Russia get out of Ukraine territory in 1991 borders, but there are other United Nations General Assembly resolutions which were not voted but which were consensual. And among them is a declaration on principles of relations between states on the basis of the Charter. And it clearly says, by consensus, everybody must respect territorial integrity of states whose governments respect the right of people for self-determination, and because of that, represent the
Egypt and some other friends of Nigeria will surely come out as a nation because we are fighting a just cause. Even a little child on the street will tell you this. We shall never go back to Nigeria again. God's grace will surely emerge as a nation. And so as far as this war continues, we will fight to the last man.
The leader of the Biafran people is His Excellency Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Ojukwu.
Those hot days, the Quakers, the only thing we could do was to find a place where our fleeing compatriots could at least find an end to their flight. This is what Biafra is, the end of the journey for a persecuted, massacred, pursued people. We have made all attempts at a democratic resolution of this crisis. I have offered open elections, plebiscite. I have offered just an open carte blanche suggestion to anybody who can find a democratic way of finding out the wishes of the people. Let him suggest it and we will go for it.
The Nigerian government is getting confused over what is going on in Finland, pertaining to the man called the PM himself, the governor governing the United States of Biafra, even in the exile as they say. Now they are even saying that that is being detained, you know, is now in the custody. Some even put it is in prison. But whichever way Nigerian media like, let them put it. But the issue remains that he is the one governing the system continuously. If you listen to Ngozi Orabese, the acting PM currently now, you discover that yes, glory be to God, because the Finland government has finally said, okay, you are free, the door is open, 2 ways, you can go and see him. Yes, and his legacy laying down is the platform that they are following. That means she have never the grace from the foundation or from the platform of the PN himself. And the PN himself is still on the ground, giving them the way to move. Because in every disciple there is always a Judas. Are you getting it? And probably now there is a Judas that may collide with Nigeria to become a saboteur. Are you getting it? So now the woman coming in this angle now, because I am hearing people saying Ngozi Arabese is dissolving the cabinet, trying to form her own. Good and fine. If there is any cabinet that have Judas among them, that Judas needs to deal with and remove, so that the cabinet need to have a thorough sanitization and have a thorough truth to where they are heading to. And glory be to God that the woman is well educated and well nurtured and trusted to say by the PM himself. Now she's moving from one country or the other. Today, currently, I can tell you vividly that she have an appointment to many countries, like over 50 countries. She have appointment to over 50 countries all over the world. She want to meet them. They have given her appointment to discuss and what is on the ground, and what is going on, and how the PM will completely have his freedom to address so many people that have already lost in their faith in the race. Are you getting it? So these things are the things that many do not know, but I want to air today for our viewers, our brothers who are in the dark, to see themselves not being in the dark, let them be enlightened as well.
Why is this sudden disagreement now? We are seeing the issue of account coming, and Simoniba is somewhere watching his loyalists, almost fighting over nothing. Will Simoniba not be disappointed that these are the people, this is the reason why I am here where I am?
Let me tell you, it's only a man that don't know how rain started beating him. And when it will end, it's a man that will see himself in that situation and become confused or be troubled. No. When Judas betrayed Jesus Christ, Christ was not troubled, neither did he shiver. He knew that he's going to play. So the issue there is this: why all these things are playing, this conflict, misunderstanding is, I've heard it before, I want to point it out now. Number one is Igbo man ego over a woman. How can a woman telling me what to do? It's not common among every Igbo man. It's not common. You get it? So I believe this is one of the problems. And number two problem is this: the PM himself did not have the quality time to address his cabinet before leaving them. Are you getting it? I believe this is another thing that play, because had it been that he addressed them properly and put things in order, these things wouldn't have come up now. Then thirdly, that the woman herself needed some people that will obey her, that can listen to her, that she herself can as well be trusted. And some of them among the other ones are claiming to be older than the woman, even in the system. I have been there before you. So why are you now? And your other point is this: probably when appointing this woman as the next person before the prime minister, I believe it wasn't official. You understand me? It wasn't official. I believe this is a secret thing, and that is another thing that come to play, and that is why they are having this kind of issues. But I believe it will soon be dissolved.
But it means that Simoniba actually trusted Dr.
Yes.
Because of antecedents.
See, listen to me. Before you trust anything in the hand of somebody, you might have one way or the other have hope and trust and every doubt about that person before entrusting or commissioning anything to that person. You understand? So I believe that he trusted this woman. In one way or the other, he have tested the woman. He have seen the ability and the capability, the strength and the integrity of this woman before making such move. That's what I believe that makes him to do that. But in every perfect move, there is always an atom of mistake. You understand? And I believe that mistake is what is causing this conflict between them now.
As the chief of staff, is she not in a position to take full charge and issue instructions based on how inconvenient? Because we know that at the end of the day, she will give account.
Yes, she have that, but based on what? The factors that I have explained. There is nothing you are doing, especially when it comes to official. When it comes officially, I don't think there should be any opposition as much. Because even if there is any opposition or opposition comes up, you will address it as the one that they are listening to. You can easily address it than the person that just coming up. You don't understand? Being a woman, for that matter. I am telling you as a typical Igbo man. You get it now? So, and that justice. So, but the PM should equally send a kind of message that will melt the heart of the accountant, minister of finance heart, and the rest of them that are finding it difficult to cooperate with this woman. He should talk to them, call them in order, and address issues like this.
If the Manipa eventually comes out and watch this case happen, who do you think he will blame?
As a good leader, first and foremost, he himself should look at his own part. As a leader, if we really want to play the role of a good leader, look at it in his own angle. Did I do it well? The decision, did I make it right? Because they themselves will air their own opinion and their grievances. Then they should look into it.
Hopefully it will be resolved.
Sure, it will be resolved easily, because and the way the women understand things always different from the way men understand things and reason to one another. You know, it will easily resolve.
This is the end of our news update. Please click the icon on the top right corner of your screen to watch my next video. You will enjoy it. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.